The kitchen was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the hushed whispers of my husband Colin and his mother Ethel. I had been up early, preparing for the day ahead, when their voices caught my attention from the hallway. "Tomorrow is the big day for her, Mom. I can't wait to see her face when it all falls apart," Colin said, his tone laced with a mixture of anticipation and disdain. My heart sank as the weight of his words hit me. They were conspiring against me, plotting to sabotage the anniversary party I had been meticulously planning for months. Ethel's raspy chuckle sent a chill down my spine. "Don't worry, dear. We'll make sure everything goes according to plan. That ungrateful woman needs to be taught a lesson." I pressed my back against the wall, struggling to catch my breath. The betrayal stung like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. How could the two people closest to me harbor such malice and deceit? As their voices faded, I retreated to the bedroom, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, and disbelief swirled within me, threatening to consume my very being. I had always known that Ethel harbored a deep-rooted resentment towards me, but I never imagined Colin would stoop so low as to conspire against his own wife. The man I had once loved and trusted had become a mere puppet, dancing to the tune of his manipulative mother. Memories of our early years together flooded my mind, a stark contrast to the present reality. Colin had been so different then, charming, attentive, and seemingly devoted to our relationship. But as time passed, his true colors began to emerge, and Ethel's influence over him grew stronger. I clenched my fists, determination coursing through my veins. I would not be a victim in this twisted game they were playing. It was time to take a stand, to reclaim my dignity and expose their despicable scheme. With a newfound resolve, I began formulating a plan. I would play along, pretending to be oblivious to their machinations, all the while gathering evidence of their deceit. Every whispered conversation, every furtive glance would be meticulously documented. As the day of the anniversary party drew closer, the tension in the air was palpable. Colin and Ethel's furtive glances and hushed tones only fueled my determination. They had no idea that the tables were about to turn, and the curtain would fall on their carefully orchestrated charade. I steeled myself, knowing that the confrontation would be intense, but I was ready. No longer would I be a passive bystander in my own life. It was time to take control and show them that I was not to be trifled with. With each passing hour, my resolve grew stronger, and the fire within me burned brighter. They had underestimated me, and they would soon learn the consequences of their actions. As the guests began to arrive, I put on my best smile, masking the turmoil that raged beneath the surface. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on a performance they would never forget. I met Colin at a charity fundraiser hosted by the local newspaper where I worked as a journalist. He was charming, well-dressed, and had a way with words that instantly captivated me. Little did I know that behind his suave exterior lurked a controlling nature that would slowly tighten its grip on my life. Our whirlwind romance blossomed quickly, fueled by passionate nights and promises of a future together. Colin showered me with affection and attention, making me feel like the center of his universe. It wasn't long before I found myself saying yes to his marriage proposal, blinded by the idea of everlasting love. The first few months of our marriage were blissful, but cracks soon began to appear in our seemingly perfect union. Colin's mother, Ethel, a formidable woman with a domineering presence, inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. What started as occasional visits quickly escalated into her dictating how we should decorate our home, what we should eat, and even how we should spend our free time. Ethel's influence over Colin was undeniable, and I watched helplessly as the man I had fallen in love with gradually transformed into a mere extension of his mother's will. The once charming and attentive partner I knew became distant and cold, his priorities shifting to appease Ethel's every whim. "Colin, don't you think your mother is overstepping her boundaries?" I would ask, only to be met with dismissive shrugs or outright hostility. "She's just trying to help, Claire. You should be grateful," he would retort, his words cutting deeper than any knife. As the months turned into years, Ethel's grip on our lives tightened. She criticized my every decision, from the way I kept the house to my choice of friends. My once thriving career as a journalist withered away, as she deemed it unbecoming for a wife and mother. "A woman's place is in the home, taking care of her family," Ethel would say, her words dripping with condescension. Colin, ever the dutiful son, nodded in agreement, leaving me feeling trapped and suffocated in my own marriage. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old box of family photos that the true extent of Ethel's manipulative nature became clear. Amidst the faded images, I discovered a disturbing pattern. My late father-in-law, a once vibrant and successful man, had gradually become a shell of his former self, his spirit crushed by Ethel's relentless control. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was caught in a generational cycle of manipulation, a twisted game where Ethel pulled the strings and Colin was her willing puppet. The man I had married was merely a product of his upbringing, conditioned to submit to his mother's every whim. As the truth unraveled before my eyes, a fire ignited within me. I would not allow myself to be another casualty in Ethel's twisted game. It was time to break free from the chains that bound me and reclaim my independence, my dignity, and my life. With renewed determination, I began to forge a plan, one that would expose the depths of their betrayal and put an end to their manipulation once and for all. No longer would I be a passive observer in my own life. I would take control and show them that I was not to be trifled with. The man I had once loved and admired slowly transformed into a mere shadow of his former self, a puppet dancing to the tune of his mother's manipulative strings. Colin, who had once been my rock, my unwavering support, became a stranger, cold, distant, and utterly beholden to Ethel's every whim. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and the caring, attentive husband I had married vanished into thin air, replaced by a man who seemed to take perverse pleasure in enabling his mother's toxic behavior. "Colin, don't you see what she's doing?" I would plead, desperate to break through the haze of Ethel's influence. "She's driving a wedge between us, controlling every aspect of our lives." His response was always the same, a dismissive wave of the hand, followed by a curt, "You're overreacting, Claire. Mom means well." Ethel's interference knew no bounds. She criticized my cooking, my choice of decor, and even the way I dressed. Every decision I made was met with her disapproving glare and a barrage of unsolicited advice. A proper wife should always defer to her husband's wishes. She would sneer, her words dripping with condescension. And Colin, ever the dutiful son, would nod in agreement, leaving me feeling small and insignificant in my own home. It wasn't long before Ethel set her sights on my career, the one aspect of my life that had once brought me joy and fulfillment. With a wave of her hand, she deemed my work as a journalist unbecoming for a married woman. "Your place is in the home, taking care of your family," she would declare, her tone brooking no argument. And just like that, the passion that had once fueled my writing withered away, replaced by a sense of emptiness and resentment. As the years passed, Ethel's grip on our lives tightened, and I found myself trapped in a suffocating cycle of manipulation and control. It was as if I were a mere spectator in my own life, watching helplessly as Ethel pulled the strings and Colin danced to her tune. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old box of family photos that the true extent of Ethel's toxic influence became clear. Amidst the faded images, I discovered a disturbing pattern. My late father-in-law, once a vibrant and successful man, had gradually become a shell of his former self, his spirit crushed by Ethel's relentless control. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was caught in a generational cycle of manipulation, a twisted game where Ethel pulled the strings and Colin was her willing puppet. The man I had married was merely a product of his upbringing, conditioned to submit to his mother's every whim. As the truth unraveled before my eyes, a fire ignited within me. I would not allow myself to be another casualty in Ethel's twisted game. It was time to break free from the chains that bound me and reclaim my independence, my dignity, and my life. With renewed determination, I began to forge a plan, one that would expose the depths of their betrayal and put an end to their manipulation once and for all. No longer would I be a passive observer in my own life. I would take control and show them that I was not to be trifled with. As the years ticked by, the walls of my once vibrant life closed in around me, suffocating me with the weight of Ethel's control. Every aspect of my existence was dictated by her whims, from the way I kept the house to the friends I was allowed to see. Maintaining connections with my former colleagues from the newspaper became an uphill battle, as Ethel deemed their influence unbecoming. For a proper wife and mother, she would make snide remarks whenever I mentioned their names, her lips curling into a disapproving sneer. "Those career women will only fill your head with nonsense," she would hiss, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "A woman's place is in the home, tending to her family. Colin, ever the obedient son, would nod in agreement, leaving me feeling isolated and alone in my own marriage. Despite Ethel's constant attempts to sever my ties with the outside world, I clung to the few remaining friendships I had, cherishing the rare moments when I could escape the oppressive atmosphere of my home. Sandra, a fellow journalist and my closest confidant, became a lifeline during those dark times. We would meet for coffee or lunch, and for a brief respite, I could shed the weight of my burdens and remember what it felt like to be my own person. "Claire, you can't let that old bat control you like this," Sandra would say, her eyes filled with concern. "You're stronger than this." Her words would ignite a spark within me, a flickering flame of defiance that refused to be extinguished. But as soon as I returned home, Ethel's icy glare and Colin's indifference would douse that flame, leaving me feeling defeated and hopeless. It wasn't until one fateful afternoon that the dam finally burst. Ethel had once again criticized my housekeeping skills, her words cutting like knives as she berated me in front of Colin. "Look at this mess," she spat, gesturing towards the living room. "Is this how you were raised? No wonder your husband is ashamed of you." Something snapped inside me, a primal urge to defend myself against her relentless attacks. I squared my shoulders and met her gaze head-on, my voice steady and unwavering. "Enough, Ethel. I've had it with your constant belittling and disrespect. This is my home, and I'll keep it as I see fit." Ethel's eyes widened in shock, unaccustomed to such defiance from her meek daughter-in-law. Colin, too, seemed taken aback by my sudden display of backbone. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Ethel seethed, her face flushing with rage. "Colin, control your wife before I do." But Colin remained silent, his gaze shifting between us, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The chains that had bound me for so long were finally beginning to loosen, and a newfound sense of determination coursed through my veins. I would no longer be a prisoner in my own life, cowering in fear of Ethel's wrath. It was time to break free from the toxic environment that had suffocated me for far too long. With each passing day, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the knowledge that I deserved better than the life I had been forced to endure. I began to make plans, carefully plotting my escape from the web of manipulation that had ensnared me for years. Ethel and Colin may have thought they had me trapped, but they had underestimated my resilience. The curtain was about to fall on their twisted charade, and I would be the one pulling the strings. The air was thick with tension as I made my way down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethel and Colin's hushed voices carried from the kitchen, their words laced with malice and disdain. "Can't wait to see the look on her face when everything falls apart," Ethel cackled, her raspy voice sending shivers down my spine. I froze in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. They were plotting something sinister, and I had a sinking feeling it involved the anniversary party I had been meticulously planning for months. Colin's response was muffled, but the tone of his voice left no doubt. He was a willing accomplice in whatever scheme Ethel had concocted. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over me, threatening to consume me from within. How could the man I had once loved, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, conspire against me in such a cruel and calculated manner? But as the initial shock subsided, a newfound determination took root. I would not be a victim in their twisted game. It was time to take control and expose their deceit once and for all. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and retrieved my phone, pressing the record button with a sense of grim resolve. Every whispered word, every malicious chuckle, would be captured as evidence of their treachery. As their conversation unfolded, the true depths of their betrayal became painfully clear. They were planning to sabotage the anniversary party, to humiliate me in front of our friends and family, to strip me of the last shreds of dignity I had left. Ethel's voice dripped with venom as she outlined their plan, her words cutting deeper than any knife. "She'll never see it coming," she sneered. "That ungrateful wretch will finally get what she deserves." Colin's response was a mere murmur of agreement, a silent endorsement of his mother's cruelty. I felt sick to my stomach, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. But beneath the pain and anger, a fire was ignited, a burning desire for justice, for validation, for the chance to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. As the recording came to an end, I slipped back into the shadows, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. The turmoil that had once threatened to consume me had been replaced by a steely resolve, a determination to turn the tables on my tormentors and expose their twisted machinations to the world. No longer would I be a passive observer in my own life. It was time to take control and show them that I was not to be trifled with. With each passing hour, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the knowledge that I deserved better than the life I had been forced to endure. I began to meticulously plan my revenge, carefully orchestrating every detail to ensure their downfall. Ethel and Colin may have thought they had me trapped, but they had underestimated my resilience. The curtain was about to fall on their twisted charade, and I would be the one pulling the strings. As the day of the anniversary party drew near, a sense of calm washed over me. The fear and uncertainty that had once plagued me had been replaced by a quiet confidence, a knowing that justice would soon be served. I went about my preparations with a newfound sense of purpose, ensuring that every detail was in place. From the decorations to the guest list, nothing was left to chance. And as the guests began to arrive, their faces alight with anticipation, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. They had no idea what was in store, no inkling of the drama that was about to unfold. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on a performance that would leave them all speechless. The night of the anniversary party had finally arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. Guests milled about the elegantly decorated venue, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries, blissfully unaware of the drama that was about to unfold. As I made my final preparations, my hands trembled ever so slightly, a mixture of nerves and adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it, the moment I had been meticulously planning for, the moment when I would expose Ethel and Colin's betrayal and reclaim my dignity once and for all. I caught a glimpse of them in the crowd, their faces a mask of smug satisfaction, as if they had already won. Ethel's eyes narrowed as she spotted me, her lips curling into a sneer of disdain. Colin, ever the dutiful son, stood by her side, his expression a blank canvas of indifference. A surge of anger welled up within me, fueled by the memory of their malicious plot to humiliate me on what should have been a joyous occasion. But I pushed it down, focusing instead on the task at hand. With a deep breath, I made my way towards the sound system, my fingers deftly connecting the small recording device I had hidden in my purse. The evidence of their betrayal was to be laid bare for all to see, and there would be no turning back. As the first notes of music filled the air, I took my place at the center of the room, a calm settling over me. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice ringing out with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you all for joining us on this special occasion." Ethel and Colin exchanged a smug glance, no doubt reveling in their perceived victory. Little did they know that the tables were about to turn in spectacular fashion. "Before we continue with the festivities," I continued, "there's something I need to share with you all." With a flick of a switch, the damning recording began to play, Ethel and Colin's voices filling the room with their malicious words. "Can't wait to see the look on her face when everything falls apart. She'll never see it coming. That ungrateful wretch will finally get what she deserves." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the truth was laid bare, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Ethel's face drained of color, her eyes wide with disbelief, while Colin stood frozen, his mouth agape. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice laced with a mixture of triumph and righteous indignation. "That I wouldn't fight back?" Ethel sputtered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "How dare you? You ungrateful, deceitful—" But her words fell on deaf ears as the guests turned on her, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation. Colin, too, found himself the target of scathing glares and whispered accusations, his once charming persona now tainted by the stain of his betrayal. As the recording came to an end, a deafening silence descended upon the room, broken only by the sound of my footsteps as I approached the stunned pair. "You thought you could break me, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You thought you could strip me of my dignity, my self-worth, but you underestimated my resilience, my determination to fight back." Ethel opened her mouth to speak, but I silenced her with a raised hand. "It's over," I declared, my words ringing with finality. "I deserve better, and I won't let you or your mother dictate my life anymore." With those words, a weight lifted from my shoulders, a burden I had carried for far too long. The chains that had bound me were finally broken, and I was free. As I turned and walked away, the murmurs of the crowd fading into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The curtain had fallen on their twisted charade, and I had emerged victorious, my dignity and self-respect intact. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me, and I intended to seize it with both hands. The aftermath of my public exposure was swift and brutal. Ethel and Colin found themselves at the center of a maelstrom of whispers and pointed stares, their once respected reputations in tatters. As the guests filtered out of the venue, their expressions ranging from shock to outright disgust, Ethel attempted to salvage what little dignity she had left. Her face contorted with rage, she rounded on me, her bony finger jabbing the air in accusation. "You vindictive harpy!" She spat, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you humiliate us like this?" Colin stood by her side, a pathetic shadow of the man I had once loved, his eyes downcast and his shoulders slumped in defeat. I met Ethel's gaze head-on, my resolve unwavering. "I did what was necessary to reclaim my life, my dignity. You brought this upon yourselves with your deceit and manipulation." Ethel sputtered, her words tumbling out in a jumbled mess of vitriol and excuses. But her protests fell on deaf ears, as the few remaining guests turned their backs on her, their disdain palpable. Colin, too, found himself the target of scorn and condemnation, his once charming persona now tainted by the stain of his betrayal. He made a feeble attempt to justify his actions, his voice wavering with uncertainty. "Claire, please. I never meant for it to go this far. You have to understand, my mother—" But I silenced him with a raised hand, my expression steely and unyielding. "Save your excuses, Colin. I'm done listening to your lies, your pathetic attempts to shift the blame onto others." He flinched as if struck, his eyes widening in surprise at the finality of my words. "It's over," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. "I deserve better, and I won't let you or your mother dictate my life anymore." Ethel's face contorted in a mask of rage, her lips curling into a snarl. "You ungrateful wench. You'll regret this, mark my words." But her threats held no power over me, not anymore. The shackles that had bound me for so long had been shattered, and I was finally free. As I turned and walked away, my head held high. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph coursing through my veins. The curtain had fallen on their twisted charade, and I had emerged victorious, my dignity and self-respect intact. In the days and weeks that followed, the fallout from my public exposure continued to ripple through our once insular social circle. Colin found himself ostracized, his business dealings scrutinized, and his reputation in tatters. Ethel, too, felt the sting of her humiliation as former friends and acquaintances turned their backs on her, unwilling to associate with such blatant toxicity. They both made feeble attempts to reach out to me, Colin with half-hearted apologies and Ethel with thinly veiled threats. But I remained steadfast in my resolve, refusing to be drawn back into their web of manipulation and deceit. It wasn't an easy road, of course. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of my decision threatened to overwhelm me. But I found strength in the support of my friends, the women who had stood by me through the darkest of times. Sandra, my closest confidant, was a constant source of encouragement, reminding me of the resilience and determination that had carried me through this ordeal. "You did the right thing, Claire," she would say, her eyes shining with pride. "You took back control of your life, and that's something to be celebrated." And as the dust settled, a newfound sense of clarity washed over me. I had been given a second chance, an opportunity to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me, and I intended to seize it with both hands. The decision to leave Colin and sever ties with Ethel was not an easy one, but it was a necessary step towards my own healing and growth. No longer would I be a prisoner in my own life, beholden to the whims and manipulations of others. As I stood on the precipice of this new chapter, I felt a sense of excitement and trepidation in equal measure. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free to pursue my passions, free to forge my own path, and free to live life on my own terms. With a deep breath and a renewed sense of purpose, I took the first step towards my new beginning, ready to embrace whatever challenges and triumphs lay ahead. The days and weeks following my separation from Colin were a whirlwind of emotions, relief, trepidation, and a newfound sense of freedom, all intermingled. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a burden I had carried for far too long. As I navigated this new chapter of my life, I found solace in the familiar embrace of my old friends and colleagues from my journalism days. Sandra, ever the supportive confidante, was by my side every step of the way, offering a listening ear and words of encouragement. "You did the right thing, Claire," she would say, her eyes shining with pride. "You took a stand and reclaimed your life. That takes immense courage." Her unwavering belief in me was a balm to the lingering doubts that threatened to creep in. With her support and that of my other friends, I slowly began to rebuild the confidence and self-worth that had been eroded by years of Ethel's manipulation. It wasn't an easy road, of course. There were moments when the weight of my decision threatened to overwhelm me, when the temptation to seek reconciliation with Colin tugged at my heart. But each time, I reminded myself of the depths of their betrayal, of the twisted game they had played with my life and my dignity. Ethel, for her part, was not content to fade into obscurity. In the weeks following the disastrous anniversary party, she made several attempts to reach out to me, her messages laced with thinly veiled threats and demands for reconciliation. "You'll regret this, Claire," she would hiss over the phone, her voice dripping with venom. "Colin will come to his senses, and you'll be left with nothing." But her words held no power over me anymore. I had broken free from her toxic influence, and I was determined to forge my own path, one untainted by her manipulation. Colin, too, made feeble attempts to reach out, his messages a jumbled mix of apologies and excuses. But I remained steadfast in my resolve, refusing to be drawn back into the cycle of abuse and control that had defined our marriage. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. With the support of my friends and the newfound clarity that came with my independence, I found myself drawn back to the world of journalism that had once been my passion. I started small, taking on freelance assignments and reconnecting with old contacts. Each byline, each article was a testament to my resilience, a reminder that I was more than just a victim of circumstance. And as my confidence grew, so too did the opportunities. Before long, I found myself fielding offers from various publications, each one eager to have my voice and my perspective on their team. Through it all, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point, the struggles, the heartache, and the ultimate triumph of reclaiming my life. It was a testament to the power of resilience and self-worth, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path forward. As I sat at my desk, the familiar clack of the keyboard a comforting rhythm, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was where I belonged. This was the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free to pursue my passions, free to forge my own path, and free to live life on my own terms. With a deep breath and a renewed sense of purpose, I turned my attention back to the blank page before me, ready to embark on the next chapter of my story. A story of resilience, self-discovery, and the unwavering pursuit of happiness.